Everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking an incredibly fascinating, frankly kind of wild web of overlapping crises. I mean, did you know that the exact price you end up paying at your local petrol pump might literally be influenced by explosive geopolitical threats unfolding right now in the Red Sea? It's like a giant puzzle. We're looking at a volatile domino effect, where domestic instability crashes right into global conflict. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you're going to see exactly how these seemingly isolated events totally connect.
Okay, let's dive into this and lay out our roadmap. First, we'll look at the economic crisis and fuel. Then, the weak role of the opposition, followed by bureaucracy versus the general public. After that, we're shifting gears to rising tensions in the Middle East. And finally, we'll wrap up with accountability and state response. All right, let's get into it.
Section 1. Economic Crisis and Fuel. Let's start right at the micro level with the situation that's hitting the common man in Pakistan with just dizzying speed.
The data the source presents here is absolutely staggering. You know, fuel price hikes used to happen maybe every 15 days, right? Well, that's shifted to an almost daily basis. Get this. Within just a 4-day window, literally from a Friday to a Wednesday, the cumulative increase has been completely brutal. Petrol surged by 16 rupees, blasting past the 327 rupee per liter mark, and even more shockingly, diesel skyrocketed by about 52 rupees, pushing it past 375 rupees per liter. The source really emphasizes the sheer frustration of the public here, because prices might drop by a tiny 35 paisa, only to be hiked by 5 or 6 rupees the very next day. And the craziest part? This is happening even when global prices were actually taking a dip.
Now, what makes this surge even more painful is the actual taxation logic behind it, which economists and journalists are heavily scrutinizing right now. The source asks a very pointed question. During a period of such extreme inflation, why is there a massive 80 rupee levy applied to every single liter of fuel? Like, if the state really needs revenue, why not just apply the standard 18% general sales tax instead? Because right now, on top of that 80 rupee levy, you've got an additional 12 rupee tax plus a 7 rupee freight charge per liter. The source neutrally but very firmly points out that literally no one in power seems willing, or maybe even able, to answer these tough questions about this massive burden that's just being shoved onto the public's shoulders.
So, Section 2, the weak role of opposition, which naturally begs the question, who is actually supposed to be asking these tough questions on behalf of the public?
And this brilliantly illustrates what the source calls a massive disconnect in the current political climate. They compared the historical protest strategies of the PTI under Imran Khan directly to what's happening today. Back in the day, despite facing intense opposition and frankly having zero support from the establishment, Imran Khan still managed to mobilize over 50 rapid nationwide street protests. He was really connecting with the masses on the ground. Fast forward to right now, with the public absolutely suffocating under fourfold electricity hikes and deep economic despair, and the current opposition's big master plan, it's a single stadium rally scheduled for August 5th in Peshawar. The source argues that gathering a few thousand people in a stadium, especially in a province they already govern, basically applies zero real pressure on the government when you compare it to actual grassroots mobilization.
And you have to understand, this lack of political resistance is unfolding against a pretty dark backdrop of alleged intimidation. The source claims that journalists who dare to cover these sensitive issues, people like Mutuel Ajan, Suhail Afridi, and Shafiul Ajan, are being actively silenced by intelligence agencies. Add in the fact that opposition leaders failed to testify regarding the recent Dchak incident, and the opposition is painted by the source as being entirely, almost willfully, disconnected from the very real suffering and massive risks currently faced by both the general public and the press.
Which brings us to Section 3, bureaucracy versus the general public. This disconnect we're talking about, it becomes glaringly obvious when you look at how the state is choosing to allocate its resources. 1.8 billion rupees. Just let that number sink in for a second. Imagine being a regular citizen, asked to endure severe daily load shedding, literal fourfold increases in your electricity bill, and crushing inflation. Now imagine that at the exact same time, the federal cabinet approves a massive new special allowance for the high-level bureaucracy to the tune of 1.8 billion rupees. According to the source, this is actually the second major allowance handed out to bureaucrats in just the last 4 years. It's a really striking contradiction, isn't it? You have immense financial rewards being handed to the bureaucracy, happening perfectly in sync with crippling austerity measures forced on the everyday citizen.
And we are seeing the absolute boiling point of this public frustration playing out right now in Azad Kashmir. A very strict deadline that the Joint Awami Action Committee gave to the government has officially come and gone, With July 23rd having just been observed as Martyrs' Day to honor those who have fallen, the source indicates that the committee has now entered what they call a do-or-die phase. The implication is pretty clear. If practical steps aren't taken by the government immediately, massive, disruptive grassroots action isn't just possible, it's imminent.
Okay, let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds into the bigger picture. Rising tensions in the Middle East. Because while domestic foundations are shaking, explosive global threats are brewing just across the Arabian Sea.
The source is reporting a severe, dangerous escalation in the Red Sea, specifically near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. For context, this is a highly critical choke point that handles nearly 10% of total global seaborne oil. It's huge. Despite explicit warnings from Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, Yemeni Houthi forces have launched attacks using advanced ballistic missiles and drones. Weaponry that the source notes is strikingly similar to Iranian technology. Their targets were two Saudi oil tankers, the Lila and the Ancilia, both of which reportedly caught on fire. This strait is such a massive bottleneck for global shipping, and the threat level is now so severe that the European Union has actually issued explicit warnings for international shipping vessels to avoid the area entirely. But the conflict doesn't stop in Yemen, not by a long shot. Over the last 2 weeks, a direct military engagement has been escalating at terrifying speed between the United States and Iran. We're talking dozens of fierce U.S. airstrikes hitting within Iranian-controlled areas. In retaliation, Iran has heavily deployed drones and ballistic missiles against American military bases stationed in Arab nations. Tragically, the source confirms that this rapid back-and-forth violence has resulted in the deaths of 4 U.S. soldiers, including 1 female soldier, alongside numerous, significant casualties on the Iranian side as well.
So, the really crucial point here is how this military clash impacts the global economy. The source highlights a truly chilling warning from an Iranian official, Kalibov, regarding the Strait of Hormuz. He flat out stated, "If our oil doesn't sell, no one's will." Basically, Iran is threatening that if they get blocked from selling their oil, they will not allow American companies in Iraq or nations like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the UAE to export theirs either. It is a massive, incredibly bold ultimatum and one that poses a completely catastrophic threat to global energy markets.
Finally, we land on Section 5, accountability and state response. Because at the end of the day, how do different nations actually handle the pressure of such massive overlapping crises? Now, what's really interesting here is how the source contrasts completely different governance models when dealing with these exact types of pressures. Look at the US and India, for example. American defense officials regularly stand at podiums and face intense, aggressive public scrutiny from journalists and politicians about war casualties and civilian deaths, and they answer those questions without automatically labeling their critics as traitors. Similarly, the source points out that youth protests in India are typically managed by the police without the state resorting to disappearing people. But on the flip side, the source alleges a very, very different reality in Pakistan. They point directly to the alleged forced disappearances of public figures and activists like Maharang Baloch and Ahmad Farhad, paired with severe, ongoing intimidation of the press. And that leaves us with a pretty profound question to chew on as we wrap this up. How can a nation possibly expect to navigate sweeping global geopolitical threats, like burning oil tankers in the Red Sea and international energy standoffs, when its very own domestic foundation is deeply fractured by economic burdens and a totally disconnected political opposition? It's an incredibly complex web, and pulling on just one thread threatens to move the entire system. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.